Good afternoon, the participants from around the Indonesian areas or Indonesian regions also come from another part of the world. This is already 5:02, and I think it's nice to get start our webinar in this afternoon. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Praise to Allah for all His mercy and kindness, so we can have international webinar by English Department of Universitas Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan in theme Recent Trends in Language Teaching in Interdisciplinary Perspective. The Honorable Higher Education Council of North Sumatra, Professor Ibnu Hajar, M.Si, Director of Universitas Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan, Ibu Musana Pasaribu, Ph.D. candidate. Our speaker, Professor Shagufta Imtiaz, Shimaa Hwaider, Ph.D. candidate, and Dedi Suheri, Ph.D., and all participants. At the first, we would like to invite all of you for National Anthem and March Muhammadiyah, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, next agenda, we go to the welcome speech by Rektor Universitas Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan, Sana Pasaribu, Ph.D. candidate, to our Ibu Rektor. Please welcome. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udzubillahi min syururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudhillalah wa may yudlil fala hadiyalah. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, amma ba'du. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to international webinar of Universitas Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan, held by Education Program, English Education Program. Before we started our main program, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to first distinguished Professor Ibnu Hajar, head of Higher Education Council, Region 1, Sumatera Utara, and also will be as an opening speech in this webinar. Distinguished Professor Shagufta Imtiaz, as a speaker from Aligarh Muslim University, India. Welcome, Prof. Excellency.
Thank you so much.
Shimaa Hwaider, a speaker from Eden University, Yemen. Welcome, dear Shimaa. Excellency Dedi Suheri, as speaker from IAIN Langsa, Aceh, Indonesia. Welcome, dear Dedi. And all of participants, even you all live in this Zoom or YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar will provide you plenty of opportunities for discuss and sharing knowledge and insights related to the recent trends in English teaching. Well, I don't want to take your time too much. I need to hand over it to moderator. I would like to say sorry if you find some mistaken on behalf of this webinar. Welcome and great to see you. And I would like to see you again in other programs. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, ma'am. And this webinar is the first event for English Department of Universitas Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan. And we are very grateful that our new head of Higher Education Council of North Sumatra, Professor Ibnu Hajar, M.Si, would like join us in this webinar. Welcome, sir. And we would like to invite you for opening our international webinar. To Professor Ibnu Hajar, very welcome, sir. Please.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I ready my speaking?
Yes.
Of course, Prof.
Okay. I am so sorry because there is a little problem with my PC. So I need to change to another PC from my staff. So here, the name is different from my name. the name is Maharyuni. So all of you will ask who is Maharyuni. So this is me. So
Okay,
thank you
it's
very
okay,
much.
Prof.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Firstly, I want to thank to all of you, especially to Rector of University of Muhammadiyah, Tapanuli, Selatan, who had this webinar, and also my happiness and my my deep appreciation to the distinguished speaker here, Professor Shagufta Imtiaz, from Aligarh Muslim University, India. Welcome, Prof. Shagufta.
Thank you, sir.
Another one. Yeah, thank you very much for joining this webinar.
Thank you so much.
And the second one from Aden University, candidate doctors, Shimaa Hwaider. Thank you very much. Welcome to this seminar. And all participants. From various backgrounds and regions attended this webinar, totally around 1,037 committee told me that the participant amount of the participants is 1,000 people. This is the great seminar for this moment. And as a head of higher education services, Region 1, North Sumatra, I want to tell my welcome and appreciate to the webinar event with the theme of building the right insight and understanding of learning English. Ladies and gentlemen, so far we know during the COVID-19 pandemic, the world, especially the world of education, and particularly schools and college, is facing challenge in finding an effective learning model for the student. From this seminar, this webinar, I hope that through the discussion in this webinar, it could broaden our perspectives and horizons of all participants about effective strategies in teaching and learning English, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. For this, I think this is time for me to say thank you very much for University of Muhammadiyah Tapanuli Selatan, who has held this webinar. I hope that it could we could get the positive thing from this webinar. As I mentioned before, we have a positive and widening our horizon about how to teach and learning English, especially for the school, high school, and also for college. This is time for me to tell my harms. Thank you for all of you. Thank you very much. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much for Prof. Ibnu Hajar, M.Si. Now, let's start our webinar. And here we are as a moderator and co-moderator. I'm Ayunda Sabrina Sormin.
I am Rahmat Uda.
And we also feel proud that our speakers who are qualified in language teaching, particularly in writing, linguistics, and listening, would like to share their knowledge with us. And also our great participants. We have many participants from various countries and universities, and
the countries from like Japan, Morocco, Thailand, the Philippines, India, Yemen, and also Egypt. Thank you.
Okay, we will go in for the first speaker, and Huda will be explain about the first speaker. Please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we go to the first speakers. Will be presented by the Honorable Professor Shagufta Imtiaz. But before I invite Prof. Shagufta to present her material or topic for discussion in this In this channel, I would like to read a short biography or briefly biography Prof. Shagufta Imtiaz. Is an English woman's college, graduated from Patna University and did her MPhil or Ph.D. from AMU. Her area of research interest is English language teaching or ELT, with a focus on advanced reading and writing. She is currently engaged in research on writing and identity and politeness or impoliteness in Ishiguro. Her teaching interest is on language, British and American literature, essays, and short stories. She has supervised over a dozen ELT projects of students of MA program in a various areas of specializations. Some reputed journals in which her articles have been published are in the Indian Linguistics, Indian Journal of Applied Linguistics, Edu Explorer. Next is English Studies in India, a Journal of Literature and Language, Kashmir, the Discourse Allegory Journal of Linguistics, the Korea and Language in India, Fortel or Forum for Teachers of English Language and Literature, Journal of Teaching English Language and Literature, Global Journal Interdisciplinary Social Sciences, published by Global Institute for Research and Education. She has been external peer evaluated of the projects submitted by Departments of Humanities and Social Sciences, National Institute of Technology, Raipur in 2018, and anonymous reviewers of Springer's proposal to review the manuscript sent for publication in 2019. And to the Honorable Professor, I'm going to say sorry if there are some mistaken from the briefly short biography. And now I would like to welcome Prof. Shagufta Imtiaz to welcome and to present our topic today. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum to all of you, and a very good afternoon to all the members. Thank you for your kind words. I am grateful to the organizers for having given me this opportunity, and it is an honor and a privilege for me, and for all the kind words that you said. I wish to thank the Rector, Professor Muksana Pasirabu, Professor Ibnu Hajar Damanik, and all the distinguished members, and all the members of the committee. I am particularly grateful to Dr. Dedi Suheri for establishing the AMU connection. Thank you all. Thank you so much. So I'll be making a PPT presentation, and I'll be speaking on the emerging trends in writing. So let me share the screen first. My talk has been divided into 4 sections. I'll be looking into the historical development of ESL writing. Number 1, emergence from cognitive. Number 2, emergence from cognitive to social aspect of writing. Number 3, issues of identity and language learning. And number 4 is writing and identity. This slide gives an insight into the various issues of writing and identity. And it is a very famous scholar, Roz Ivanish, who speaks about this. And she looks at the way in which writing evolves and views academic writing as a site of struggle. It paves the way for researchers and has very important implications for language teaching and learning. This is the flow chart which is there of the reader and writer in the text. So the entire aspect of writing and reading, it revolves around this. So I trace the historical development of writing. So I begin with this. And In the early 20th century, there was the primacy of speech, and writing had been a neglected skill, and it was treated as a sub-skill of speech. Research in writing came very late. It had always been a neglected activity. Although there were some earlier studies, they were not supported by research. Dartmouth seminar in 1966 was a historical landmark. Scholars from other disciplines, they converged over here. Scholars from philosophy, psychology, education, and they critiqued the traditional concept of writing. The emphasis now was to describe how ordinary writers write and not how they should write. So it became more descriptive. It was going towards that. These are the pioneering empirical research which began with Janet Emmons. She's a very quoted and a very cited writer, The Composing Processes of 12th Graders. This represents the beginning of the empirical research on writing. And she investigated the writing as a cognitive composing process by studying the writing styles of the 12th graders. And she used the think aloud methodology, the study of pauses, the role of reading and revision. And it introduced a new approach to understanding writing as a process. Shields critiqued the public school for neglecting the basics. Her work was with the basic writers. And she noted a displacement in writing instruction by too many creative methods. Shagufta, again a very important name over here in 1977, who revolutionized the writing instruction. She looked at the logic and the student errors in writing of 4,000 basic writers in New York City. She was the first composition scholar to claim that writing is a social act. The controlled composition. So this is how we move on historically. So it began with the controlled composition. It has its roots in C.C. Freeze's oral approach, and it was influenced by behaviorism, where language was speech, learning was habit forming, emphasis was on accuracy and correctness and avoidance of errors. And writing over here, so what was the role of writing? Writing functioned as a handmaid of other skills. Writing was a sub-skill over here. It was the primacy of speech. It was that era. This was followed by the current traditional rhetoric. That formed a kind of a bridge between controlled and free writing. And this was in the mid-60s. And it was influenced by Kaplan's theory of contrastive rhetoric, where rhetoric was viewed as a method of organizing syntactic units into larger patterns. And the central concern over here was the arrangement of discourse forms in various kinds of writing, like descriptive, expository, persuasive, etc. This was followed by the cognitive approach. So this drew from the cognitive psychology, and it revolved around the writer's mental processes. And the two important buzzwords over here were thinking and process. So the concern was that what are the cognitive processes of an individual, and how do these processes vary across individuals and the context. Composing over here was as contrasted from the earlier approach. It was non-linear, it was recursive, it was generative. Writing was looked as a heuristic activity, and writing was a problem-solving activity. And think aloud protocols were used at this time. These were some of the important models which have been given over here. So I've just taken one model. There are others also, and even this is the initial Flower and Hayes model which I have taken, and it was revised also later. But I've just taken one, so this is the Flower and Hayes model, which looks at. So this is an important cognitive model of Flower and Hayes, which can be divided into three sections. There's a task environment that we can see, and the writer's long-term memory, and this is the monitor which is there. So this is and it remained dominant for a number of years. So it proposed that composing processes are interactive and intermingling. Composing is a goal-directed activity, and it was the important findings were that it raised an understanding of recursion in writing to a new level. It opened writing research to more explicit claims and to testable hypotheses. And we can see over here the arrows which are there, which are two ways. So there is no kind of a product which is there, but it is a continuity which is established in this flow chart. The influences on writing research came from two dominant areas. And so one was literacy and composition research, which we have already talked about, Janet Emick, Flower and Hayes, Shaughnessy, and where Shaughnessy looks at the 4,000 writers, etc. And from the Center of Writing, 1985, and this led to the development of socio-cognitive view of writing, and which has come from Bandura, which states that the human learning occurs in a social environment and assigns a central role to self-regulatory functions. Then the influence also came from anthropologists and the sociolinguists. They wanted to document the contrasting patterns of language use of members of various racial and ethnic communities. So Delheim's was his ethnography of communication. It focused on the communicative patterns of the community and compared it across communities. So we see how it is scholars from different areas started converging towards this aspect of writing and trying to understand writing and trying to look at writing not just as a product. Following this was Schwez, who talked about the ethnography of writing, and he called for the study of writing across community rather than focusing on the classroom. And he looked at the community practices which are there. Some of the questions which he asked were, how is writing ability distributed in a community? How do these writing abilities vary? Beginning in the 1980s, I now move on to the social context approach. This was in 1980s, where socially oriented views of writing emerged from different areas. And Bizzle challenged the earlier models, and by asking this, that what is missing here is a connection to the social context. And again, this also raised a few questions related to the earlier approaches. They asked that what is the influence of the community context on teaching writing? What is the influence of the learner's culture on writing performance? From this, I move on to William Lebov's. So this was, Lebov influenced them by the logic of non-standard English. And his work was on Black English vernacular, and he said that which native speaker, primarily talking about the variations which are there. So that influenced it. Then Sommer's work on revision, this was also important. Revision had also been mentioned and has been talked about in Flower and Hayes' model, but they started looking now at the the reader. So the reader was focused on, which earlier had been neglected. So the relationship between readers and writers assumed importance. And earlier, the autonomous text had meaning independently of the reader's interaction with the text. That means the reader had not been given so much importance. Then I move on to the social constructionist approach. This is an epistemology about the nature of learning, which states that individuals construct much of what they learn or understand. And it states, I read, this is by Bruffy, entities we normally call reality, knowledge, thought, facts, texts, selves, they are constructs generated by communities of like-minded peers. And it understands all such things as community generated and community maintained, entities that define or construct the communities that generate them. The basic premise over here is that thinking or learning was situated in social context. It does not talk about how language is acquired, but how it is constructed and how the human processes are mediated by tools which Vygotsky had said in the socio-cultural aspect. And it questioned the earlier assumptions again. They questioned the earlier assumptions, which were that, what were these assumptions? The assumption was that thinking resides in the mind rather than in the interaction between processes and situations. Processes of learning and thinking, number two, processes of learning and thinking are relatively uniform across individuals. Number three, knowledge and skills develop in formal settings. I now move on to identity, which is a very important issue and which concerns language learning. So this is how I have brought in, making it more contemporary. The complex nature of language learning and its role in second language has changed. It is now characterized by linguistic and socio-cultural diversity, where language use and identity have become important issues in research. A theoretical shift to the focus on the domain of identity marks an important rethink in research in language teaching. Cross-cultural and identity development are key factors in academic achievement. In the globalized, multilingual, multicultural world, where half the members are from various ethnic, social, and cultural communities, issues related to identity need to be integrated with language learner and the language learning. So what is identity now? So the term has been used for people's sense of who they are, how one perceives, and how one is perceived by others. So it has been variously defined from different disciplines. Erickson was the first one who had studied among the World War II veterans and who had looked at the identity constructions at that time. Tajfeld's social identity involves the knowledge of being a member of a social group. And Guy states that identity is a recognition of being a certain kind of a person in a certain situation. Norton famously defines identity as the ways in which a person understands his or her relationship to the world, how that relationship is constructed across time and space, and how that person understands possibilities for the future. I unquote. Identity can be social, personal, cultural, ethnic, national, so many other things that we can think of. And it has been studied by the various disciplines. And it is not static, but every time it is negotiated, it is constructed and reconstructed. These are certain perspectives on identity. So Guy talks about these perspectives. He describes 4 perspectives on identity. And the first is the nature perspective, where identity is naturally occurring outside forces have little influence. So it is nature. So the outside forces do not have much influence. The second is the institutional perspective, where identity is ascribed through the authorization in the classroom. The identity of speaker is shaped and influenced by the teacher also. The discourse perspective, in this, the spoken and the written discourses determine the construction, and the interactions within the classroom that impacts the emergence of identity. And it is a result of interaction between individuals in a particular setting. And this is Dyson's work, which shows that how it has influenced the writing ability. And the fourth is the affinity perspective, where identity development takes place inside and outside the classroom. So it is not just that it remains confined to the classroom. So it has to be broadened, and it has to be looked at what is happening outside and how does that influence writing. So it means that out of school activities need to be incorporated so that students recognize these as valuable in the academic writing achievement. Work on identity offers language learning an important a theory which integrates the learner with the social world. So the insights which have been provided by Guy can help us understand the role which identity plays in writing. And one gains an understanding of the role which these interactions play in the shaping of students' identity development in the classroom setting. Language learning and identity is a very rapidly expanding area, and insights have been drawn from post-structuralist theory of language and identity, and it views identity as fluid, multiple, context dependent. So these are all important aspects of the post-structuralist debate which is there. Earlier, the SLA talked about motivation, which had been a psychological construct, and they looked at learners primarily as divided in binary terms: unmotivated, unmotivated, extrovert, introvert, etc. Now there is a slight change. Norton brings in this sociological aspect of investment which is there. So investment signals the socially and historically constructed relationship of learners to the target language and their ambivalent desire to practice it, to learn it. It views the language learner as having a very complex social history. And it presupposes that language learners in learning the target language are constantly organizing, and they are reorganizing a sense of who they are, how do they relate to the world. And investment in the target language is also an investment in the learner's identity. Investment presupposes that language learners are constantly organizing themselves. And Norton argues that high motivation of a learner may not necessarily lead to effective language learning. A person invested in a given set of practices. Example, language practices in the classroom which may be marked by many differentials. And so the learner may not, and it may not be consistent with the learner's expectations. So the learner is motivated but not invested enough in that practice. Duff, I've given this in his study in Canada in a multilingual secondary school, has talked about how the learners were afraid. This is at the spoken level. So the learners, the overseas learners, they were afraid of being criticized because of the limited command of English, and hence they took recourse to silence. Their silence was perceived, so silence protected them from humiliation. It is a very strong sentence which has been said by Duff. And their silence was perceived by the native speakers as a lack of initiative, agency, or a desire to improve one's English. The findings showed that the learners were motivated, but they were not invested in the language practices, where there was an unequal power relation between the native and the non-native speakers. We can assist the learners through the role. So the classroom role plays an important role in the development of and the achievement of identity. Identity needs to address the following questions. Number one is, considering that investment is an important factor in learning, what is the learner's investment in the practices of language classrooms? B, since the environment of learning is invariably inequitable, how does one address the relationship between language learners and the inequitable environment of learning? C, what kind of research helps learners to investigate the relationship between language learners and this inequitable world in which learning takes place? Writing is not just about conveying content, but it is also about one's representation of self. One of the reasons why people find it difficult is that they are not comfortable with the me which they are portraying. So writing has, as this is Ross Ivanish, the first slide which was there, writing is an act of identity in which people align themselves with socio-culturally shaped possibilities of selfhood and playing the part in reproducing or challenging the dominant practices and discourse which they embody. In identity approach to writing, in the identity approach to writing, the focus has mainly been on narratives through fieldwork, ethnographic, autobiographical accounts, which means a qualitative work. And this brought in a social turn in writing. Pavlenko speaks about the L2 language theories, stories, which are unique, and they are rich sources of information about the relationship between language and identity and the second language learning as socialization. Cummins brings in a new approach, which is the identity text. And this was used by the Multiliteracies Project in Canada to describe the creative work and the literary narratives and the multimodal performances, which reflected the identities in a positive light. So it challenged the essentialist notions and how how identity is shaped by writing and the influence of the home, community, school, all these. Ivanish talks about the 4 aspects of self. The self, to put it in simply, has been referred to as who I am, what I am. So the autobiographical self, which is the identity which the writer brings based on the past experiences and shaped by the life history. Some of the questions which are asked over here are, what are the ways in which the past histories affect our writing? How is the autobiographical self related to other selves? The discursive self is what the writer conveys about himself or herself through the choices that she makes. And the questions over here are, what are some discourse characteristics specific to this piece of writing? In what ways are they a reflection of the writer's identities? Then the self as author. This establishes the authorial presence and the willingness to make certain claims. This is the self as author. And the questions asked are, what are the ways in which the discourse reflects the voice of the writer? How do writers differ in their claim for authority? And this is the possibilities for selfhood, which is more an abstract thing, where is concerned with the socially available possibilities of selfhood, where the earlier three approaches are concerned with the actual act of writing. So, which means that there may be various ways of doing things, and some may be more privileged. And this is a pattern of privileging which is concerned. For example, a person may be a learner, researcher, etc. So, what is it that is being, how is the writer being positioned? These are some of the significant studies which are there. And this is Roz Ivanish in Writing and Identity. And it views, so these are, I've just taken 4, of course, there are so many others, but she explores how the academic writing is a site of struggle and is based on a collaborative research project about writing and identity with the mature students. And it views the discursive construction in academic writing among 8 students and the relationship between language identity from 3 perspectives, which are linguistic theory, literacy theory, discursive construction. The second is Bonnie Norton's Identity and Language Learning. And she draws on, this is a longitudinal case studies of immigrant speakers in immigrant women in Canada. And addresses the following conditions. Under what conditions do learners speak, listen, read, and write? How is the identity negotiated? And it integrates research, theory, and practice. Ken Hyland's authority identity. This explores the identity in the L2 writing. It examines, this is quantitative work which has been done, and he takes up the I and the we which is there and tries to look at how that has an impact on the writing, on the academic writing of the learner. Then V. Ramanathan writing. So she looks at, which is based on a 7-year-old project in India, and she looks at the impact of the local factors which affect English and the vernacular medium. So how does this disparity have an impact on the identity construction of the learner? And there are other works by Ramanathan. One is by Ramanathan Atkinson. Some of the current, I'll just read some of the current practices which are there in writing, and some of the things and for which we can work on as language teachers. One is the interdisciplinarity in writing research, which takes research, writing research draws from all these different areas. Then the sensitivity to the classroom heterogeneity. So we cannot assume a homogeneous situation most of the time, which is a very ideal kind of a thing. So the research in the emergence of writing shows that learners, they achieve greater academic success when the school focuses on the diversity of learners and when it supports and affirms their racial, linguistic, cultural identities or any other such differences. Then the out-of-school practices need to be capitalized. Number 3, which needs to be capitalized for their academic writing identity, which may be ignored by the school, but that has to be capitalized. Number 4 is bridging the gap between the home literacy and classroom literacy, because literacy has also played a very important aspect over here. So differences between the home literacy and classroom literacy, that has been a challenge that needs to be lessened. And again, I have given a few work which has been done. Then the individualistic and collectivist culture. This also, they are individualist cultures are problematic to students from cultures where the self is collectively constructed. This is one of the, and there are other studies also where they basically they look at, it may be to some extent a generalization, but they're looking at the Eastern and the Western cultures and saying that the Eastern cultures are more collectively constructed. Then the teacher's emancipatory authority, which draws insights from Giro, who argues that teachers are bearers of critical knowledge, rules, and values, and they need to play an active and critical role in the classroom. Then learners as ethnographers, where learners are encouraged to conduct their own ethnographies of academic community and positions which they expect to occupy in their academic writing. And their expectations must not be devalued. Then reflections on critical thinking, extended opportunities for reflection and critical thinking is required for learners to develop their identity. Critical thinking is a very important aspect now. Then the identity text. Cummins came up with an identity text, which I've already referred to it earlier, which was used by the Canada Multiple Literacy Project, which included literary narratives and multimodal performances of the learners. So this can also be used as an important strategy to teach writing in the classroom and to reshape their identity. And it can be an educational strategy. Then the last here is the teacher education, where the focus has been on the emerging identity of a novice teacher through the social processes of the classroom. So in what ways does the teacher also, the identity of the teacher also changes? So from the beginning and moving on within the interaction in the social processes and in the interaction between the teacher and the classroom and the learner. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much for the comprehensive explanation, Professor. And now we will go to the next speaker, Mr. Dedi Suheri, Ph.D. Mr. Dedi is English lecturer in IAIN Langsa and Irwin and lecturer also in LP3I Banda Aceh dan Langsa. His PhD from Aligarh Muslim University, and his achievement got ICCR scholarship, Indian Council for Cultural Relation, and also as mahasiswa teladan tingkat doktor 2015 by KBRI New Delhi, India. Wow, it's so nice for doctoral program, sir. Mr. Dedi would like to discuss of multilinguality, a language, the native speaker, and education. For Mr. Dedi, very welcome, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the moderator who has given me time to share information about my title today. But I need to share my screen, right? Just a minute. Yeah, is it audible, Miss Ayunda? Hello?
Yes, Mr.
Yes, is it audible? Can you hear me, Miss Ayunda?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yep. Okay, I would like to share my slide. Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir. It's
Yeah,
nice
okay.
slide.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam warahmatullah.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My honorable to Professor Dr. Ibnu Hajar Damanik as the head of higher education services Region 1 of North Sumatra, and to Ibu Dr. Dr. Randa Muksanah Pasaribu as Director of MTapsel, and my deep respect to my teachers, Professor Imtiaz Hasnain, Professor Shagufta Imtiaz, and my particular teacher is Mr. Manugaren from WISU, and he has taken part in this webinar. And all to distinguished speakers, Professor Shagufta Imtiaz and Dr. Shimaa, and also the moderator, Ms. Ayunda and Mr. Rahmat Huda, and to all distinguished participants, good afternoon to all of you. First of all, allow me to express my deep gratitude to the all committee for this international webinar on recent trends in language teaching in interdisciplinary perspectives. Well,
Okay,
ladies and
thank you, sir.
gentlemen, yeah, although we are under suffering of the pandemic, it is indeed a pandemic that have journey given us intergenerational challenges. It means we are the generation still have been quoted here, quoted or chosen to face this pandemic. And inshallah, we are not only survive, we will become much stronger people. We will become much stronger nation and also much stronger solidarity of mankind across the globe. Amin, inshallah. Okay, I think my title is a bit more general as presented by Professor Shagufta because he is very expert in this thing. But I am making you all to concern of my topic about of multilinguality, language, the native speaker, and education. Okay, this who am I? The moderator has already explained about me. And yeah, I start my presentation. It has divided into 3 parts. First is language. Sorry. Yeah, first is language, and the second native speaker, and implication for education. So this is my topic today of multilinguality, because multilinguality has been described by Professor Shagufta before: language, the native speaker, and education. Okay, we start from language for the first part. So as we know that culture is an important mechanism of human interaction, which helps people to live in their environment, to preserve the unity and integrity of the community. The knowledge formulated in certain concept and representation and recorded in the language. Then language is one of the important element. Yeah, language is one more important element of culture. The language being a cognitive, science, symbolic element of culture. And we wish to understand, we wish to understand the nature of language and the behavior of human groups. And I divide it into 4 groups here. First is, what do they think about language itself? First is about linguists. What do linguists think about language? And they will say language is essentially a pairing of syntax and a lexicon, often in the context of universal grammar. And what about the great creative writers? And the creative writers will think that language is writing in a pure standard form to become a reference point to measure the proficiency levels of their fellow speakers. And what do the politicians think about language itself? They will say it is a name, a marker of an identity which may be useful for our variety purposes. And I think most of the population of Indonesian people not only included to three groups, but most of us maybe lies in a lay person or human groups. They will say language is multilinguality that is constitutive of their identity, and it is fluidity among languages. Further, we constantly vary our linguistic behavior depending on changes in person, place, and topics as well-established principle of sociolinguistic theory, even though a considerable part of actual sociolinguistic research still operate within the constraint of the system of a language. Thus, a performative phenomenon distinctly marked by multilinguality is consistently viewed and analyzed through a prism of monolinguality. The domain of education is perhaps the worst hit in this process. Okay, so a language as such a function, I will describe also the social function of language. What do we need to make friends? We need a language. And how do we learn math? And how do we learn English? And how do we learn speaking? We need we also need language kind function, and also connecting with family. How do we ask some money from our parents, from our mother? Of course, absolutely, we need language to us our purpose, to us our intention. And how do we express our love to whom, to girl whom we love, to boy whom we love? We need language. And what about forming a relationship or silaturahmi? So we need language. Holding a spiritual belief, of course, we need language. Doing business, how to make our business getting much profit, we need language. And the last, taking a political action, we also need language. So this is social function of language. And now we are going to intervention in language use, because we are educated people, so we don't ignore that language has the role important for this interpretation of language in education. For example, here, what language skills should children attain beyond basic literacy? Should our children be steered towards use of Indonesian or Bahasa or Indian or Arabic from early education? Do our children have a right to be educated in the language they use at home? And next question will be raising again. Should everyone really study foreign languages? And if so, which one? English, Arabic, or other foreign languages? Next, should the teaching of a foreign language exclusively be referred in that foreign language? And the last, the questions coming here, should every child study literature, their own national literature, or that of other countries? Okay, related to these questions, Ali Day, 1967, has persistently argued that acquisition of languages can be used as a model for teaching in general. It is from the acquisition of language that one can best learn how children construct knowledge. In addition, Hunting, 2011, state that a large proportion of these children simply operation out of school system. They are actually pushed out. Okay. I will show you this pyramid, this figure taken from Mohanty 2015 in multilingual societies in India. The hierarchy of power of privilege associated with languages affect the dominant language users. Their chance upward social mobility and development of capabilities. We can see here the dominant languages is English. So English at the top of hierarchy, and the major state languages, dominant languages, vernacular divide. So Mohanty divided into two multilingual societies in India. First is dominant languages vernacular divide, and the second is vernacular other divide. ITM here, indigenous tribal minority languages. It relates to major state languages, and dominant languages will be relating to major state languages. First is dominant languages vernacular divide, and the second vernacular other divide. So now for the second part of my topic today, what is about native speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to native, and native. It means that native is derived from Latin. Nativus, it means inborn or natural. The idea of a native speaker has been explored in detail, among others, by Colmers 1981, Patayana 1981, Pekede 1985, Singh 1994, and Davis 2003. Singh said, linguistically speaking, a native speaker of a language is a person who has relatively stable and consistent grammatically judgment, which shares with some speakers regarding structures alleged to be from his language. We can say that all human beings negotiate different communicative encounters and discourse using domain-specific language varieties. In the case of people using completely different languages, the same objective is achieved by using different languages. For example, here, I will share the story here. A speaker may have high levels of competence in speaking Achenese because I live in Aceh right now. So, and as she negotiates communicative encounters with her parents, when she talked to her parents, to her grandparents by her mother tongue. Her mother tongue is Achenese language. And then, but she may not have any proficiency in writing Achenese, in reading and writing Achenese. Her early education may almost exclusively be in Bahasa Indonesia, because she takes class in government schools. As we know that all languages be spoken in Bahasa Indonesia, not in Achenese language. And when she take class to higher education or to university, she will study English, she will study Arabic. So it means that she will be multilingual. So this, I say to you that all human beings negotiate different communicative encounters and discourse. using domain-specific language varieties in the case of people using completely different languages. The same objective is achieved by using different languages. Okay, so from native speaker, the fluidity that fundamentally constitutes multilinguality. We are talking again and again about multilinguality, may perhaps be best seen in what ordinary human beings do with languages and script in the material world. Okay, see what does Ibnu Hajar and friends saying about multilinguality. Multilinguality then is a default human situation, and every classroom is inherently multilingual in a variety of ways. Recent research, Cummins and Swain, 1986, Edward, 1998, Auditory, 1995, 1997, 2005, and 2007, has established how this multilinguality can be used as a resource teaching strategy and goal. Okay, and the last part from my presentation today is about how much implication multilinguality for our education. We can see that if we wish to ensure that children from the margin of society stay in school, one of the things we need to ensure is that the vision of classroom here, first is they have textbook, absolutely. And what happens with language? What happens to language and multilinguality itself? We need to recognize language must be conceptualized as multilinguality. I repeat again, we need to recognize that language must be conceptualized as multilinguality, and we need to consciously think ways of providing space for the language for children in the classroom and school. Next, from this part, we can see that language as a cultural capital is critical link to education and access to social resources. This is the function of language in education. What about the relation multilingual societies and language? In multilingual societies, languages are associated with power and hierarchy. Some languages enable greater access to privileges and social opportunities, and others lead to repression and discrimination. Okay, from that, I can conclude multilingualism has power with classroom resources. And also, from the multilingualism will giving effect, good effect to a teaching strategy and educational goal. So finally, I will say that if we begin to use multilinguality as a resource and as a teaching strategy, we would meet Krassen's proposal far more squarely. He suggests that if the estimated cognitive level of children is, say, I repeat again, if the estimated cognitive level of children is, say, I, then the materials presented to them must be I plus 1. So it means that there is the fundamental relation between language and, as I told you here is multilingualism, classroom resource, methodologies, and a teaching strategy and educational goal. So finally, I will say that the world of education has to learn a lot from this celebration of multilinguality. This my references because I am talking about multilingualism, multilinguality. So I would like to you, thank you very much. A big thank you. Syukron kathiran, bahut syukriya, and terima kasih. Thank you for moderator. Thank you for giving me a time. And sorry for description. I think the connectivity in my area is not good.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, ladies and gents. I think that's very nice description from Sir Dedi Suheri. But when I'm listening to Pak Dedi, inshallah will be a prof, I think later. And also when I'm listening to Professor Shagufta, I feel like in India now. I mean, it's very nice pronunciation, there's very nice accents in speaking English. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now I would like to invite the third speaker is Shimaa Hwaider. But before I go to the Shimaa, I'm going to read CV or curriculum vitae, short curriculum vitae, but I'm not going to read all. I'm sorry, dear Shimaa. And the name is Shimaa Muhammad Abdullah Said. His surname is Hwaider. And education, the latest education is Ph.D. in linguistics, specialist applied linguistics. This is the final year. I hope you can complete your PhD this year, inshallah. Amin. Thank you. I go to the publications by Shimaa. And the publication, I think, is in the 2000 and latest, in 2010 and also in 2017. In 2010, it's related to investigating and developing the teaching of the listening skills in the secondary schools in Aden Governorate. And the second is in 2017 is the problem of teaching the listening skill to Yemeni EFL learners. International Journal of Scientific and Research Publication. That's very nice research, I think, because the problem of teaching listening skills, I think, belongs to all of the people, all of the country, not only in Yemen, but also in Indonesia. But I think that's very nice resource for us, especially me, to conduct a research related to the listening skill, Shimaa. Thank you. Now to the Shimaa, the dear Shimaa, now is time, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And at the outset, just allow me please to thank Muhammadiyah University, all members of the university and the staff for this kind of invitation. And also I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to University of Aden and Aligarh Muslim University for providing me with such an opportunity to be here with such an international elite. Also a special word of thanks goes to the Department of Linguistics at Aligarh Muslim University for helping me, represented in as chairman, Dr. or Prof. RC, and my supervisor, Dr. Abdul Aziz Khan, as well as Dr. or Prof. Imtiaz Hassanin for their kind support. And also I'd like to thank all the audience with us today from different countries all over the world, professors, doctors, teachers, and students, and research scholars. My topic, I will share my slides with you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
My topic is about the recent trends in teaching and learning the listening skill. There are three major trends that I will talk about today. Here, the first one is the recent trends in teaching and learning, the English language and the listening skill. And the second one is listening strategic teaching and learning. And the third one is the motivating and training teachers to incorporate strategy training in the classroom. The first trend, that is recent trends in teaching and learning the English language in general and the listening skill. We will take the most popular trends and innovative trends today, according to Chong 2018, Guan et al. 2018, Muhammadiyah et al. 2010, Hobakova et al. 2011, and other also researchers. The most innovative trends in English language teaching and learning, which are also applicable to teaching the listening skill, are the first one is blended learning. Then we have also e-learning. Third, gamification. And fourth, embedded learning. Fifth is the inquiry-based learning. Sixth, teachers as lifelong learners. And the last trend, just here I made it as the last because I will elaborate on this trend, that is strategic teaching and learning. We will start with blended learning. What do we understand about the blended learning? Actually, it is a combined teaching as a combination of standard face-to-face teaching with e-learning also. It enables the use of many different forms and methods in foreign language teaching, in which online courses leave a room for any inclusion of many listening text and video files. And here there are two types of such learning which can be applied: synchronous teaching and also asynchronous teaching. The synchronous teaching proceeds in the actual time and the participants can react at the same time. And the asynchronous teaching is usually conducted in different times with two different participants with flexibility in choosing the time and the way of receiving the experience, but they can't react mutually at the same time. There are so many apps today online that the teachers or learners can use. Just I will give an example here for one app that it is a combined pre-sessional course by King's English Language Center or King's College London. This app is combines face-to-face teaching as well as online lessons. Also there is one book, it is by Lindensi et al. And Hapil, that it is Interaction Online Creative Activities for Blended Learning by Cambridge University Press. Now we will come to the second type of learning here, that it is e-learning. Actually today e-learning, it is so popular, especially at this time of pandemic COVID-19, that we are using the use of, and it can be understood as the intentional use of network information and communication technology in teaching and learning. That is, it is the application of electronic systems such as internet, computers, multimedia CDs in teaching and learning. It is also known as the web-based English learning and online learning and computer-assisted language learning. Such type of learning, it includes some useful advantages as well as there are also some drawbacks. But here the most wonderful things is the advantages of such type of learning. The first one, it is learner-centered teaching process. And this is what we today focus on, that how to make the learner is only the center in the classroom with the help of the teacher at different levels of teaching. I'm talking about in the primary schools and also secondary. It is also at the level of universities. So, and the role of the teacher here is only a guide or facilitator. But in such type of learning also, the teacher is, his role is very important to guide the learners. It is also convenient for students in terms of time, place, and rate. It is fast and dynamic and reduces the amount of expenses. It fosters interaction among students and instruction. Such an interaction can also lead to communication skills and also the speaking skill. It supports learners' autonomy, motivation, enthusiasm, interest. And also, in terms of comprehensive learning, it contains all the instructional sources and tools such as virtual classes or simulations. In terms of the material provided, we can see that such type of learning provide authentic materials supported by audio, video devices, which assist the learner in reducing the pace of time used for explaining the abstract ideas. It means it turns the abstract ideas to concrete. However, we have also some disadvantages. It can be represented in decreasing the social relationship among the learners, and sometimes also among all the participants, even included the teacher. The second point is the limitation of the technological knowledge of some learners that sometimes can hinder them to work properly. And the third point, it is the lack of experience, acquaintance with such kind of learning or teaching process of some teachers, which can interrupt them and the progress of such a learning. It also reduces the amount of face-to-face contact and the amount of teachers' supervision on learners. Now we come to the third trend, that it is gamification. Gamification is an educational approach to motivate students to learn by using video game design and game elements in learning environment, as Carroll 2012 defined that. The goal is to maximize the enjoyment and engagement through capturing the interest of learners and inspiring them to continue learning. In such kind of learning, there are some examples within the educational context. That is one of them, the desired student's behavior, which can potentially appear and influence, including the attending of the class and focusing on meaningful learning tasks, as well as taking initiative. Also, if we come to see some ads provided online, we can see that the Learn Match. The Learn Match is one app which uses training sessions, friendly matches, ladies, and cup games to make vocabulary learning for fun and for young learners. Also Get Set and Go Fonts by Oxford University Press. They provided some chants and songs and games to help develop preschool children phonological awareness. Such type of trends, it is very popular to be used, and it is useful to be used as with the like learners at schools at the primary levels. It is very useful. The embedded learning is based on the idea that learning is not just about remembering. It involves using the mind, the body, and collaborative, and also the discussion and exploration. Learners need to be emotionally, intellectually, physically, and socially engaged. Courses such as Doodle Town by Macmillan Education provide such a type of learning. Now we come to the inquiry-based learning. First of all, we here come to the idea that we have as a teachers to think these materials that we are providing our students with, to what extent it helps, they help our learners to face the challenges of the 21st century. Now we are coming in this century with a lot of devices, with a lot of sources for learning. So we have to ask ourselves to what extent we are helping our students to provide the challenge to be according to the level in such area. So inquiry-based learning is an approach to learning that emphasizes the student's role in the learning process. Rather than the teacher telling the students what they need to know, students are encouraged to explore the materials, ask questions, and share ideas. It is also a form of active learning that starts by posing questions or posing some problems scenarios. The inquiries will identify and research issues and questions to develop knowledge or solutions. It is related to the development and practice of thinking and problem solving. It is often assisted by facilitator rather than a lecturer. It includes a small group discussion and guided learning. Instead of memorizing facts and materials, students learn by doing. And this is very important. And we can find such roots of such learning in the total physical response by Archer for the listening skill, which boasts this as a principle for teaching the listening skill. So here it is very advantage in also listening skill as well as English language in general. Now we come to teachers as lifelong learners. Teachers are expected to engage in continuous professional development or professional learning activities from the beginning to the end of their career. As with any other profession, teachers are also expected to assume greater responsibility for their own professional learning, continually developing their knowledge and skills. We should not stop to the point that now we are teachers. No, we are teachers, but still we are also learners in a lifeline. In our life, it will not stop at any point. We have to develop ourselves to be at the level of this 21st century, and also to develop our students with us. Now we have this trend that is strategic teaching and learning. It is very important, and I'm focusing on this as one way of developing the listening skill precisely. So I will come again to tell you why listening skill. The strategic learning and teaching. It highlights the importance of teaching-learning connection. It aims at enabling all types of students to become successful learners. It is strategic, focuses on teaching students strategies. What are these strategies? Also, I will explore, give it in details. The metacognition and mindsets. They can leverage to enhance their ability to learn. Ultimately, the goal of strategic learning is to help students become self-directed lifelong learners who can effectively learn in any environment. Teaching English language classes focuses on fostering students' thinking as well as language content, outcomes, and learning activities. Now, here we come to the next trend in it is also related to the strategic teaching, precisely about listening. Listening, strategic teaching, and learning. I told you that why listening. If we look at this picture, you can see that we have this picture for Cinderella. So why Cinderella here? Because Nonan states that listening is the less researched skill. It is the Cinderella skill among all the skills and issues of English language teaching and learning. However, listening skill is very important, very fundamental to acquire the language properly and use it in speaking, though it was suffering from negligence in the past. Just in the last 4 decades, listening skill starts to have some importance, but still we need to develop this process of listening and also the principles for teaching the listening skill. Van der Graaf also supports such a view, states that listening comprehension lies at the heart of language learning, but it is still the least understood and the least researched skill. Chen also gives us another quote that is, due to the complicated nature of the listening process, relatively few training studies have been conducted in L2 foreign language listening. Besides, in spite of the expanded research in the field of second language strategy, recently studies in listening comprehension are relatively less. One of the important trends now today for teaching the listening skill, it is the strategy training. Now, we have also to ask ourselves, what do we mean by strategy training and how we can apply this strategy training. Strategy training is a plan, step, or conscious action towards the achievement of an objective, according to Oxford 1990. It is also the training of language learning strategies. Now we have another term that it is language learning strategies. What are they? They can be defined as thought and actions consciously selected. So we also have to focus on such a word that it is consciously selected by learners to assist them in learning and using the language in general and in completion of a specific language task. This is according to Richard 2018. And besides also Richard et al. In 1992, add that they are ways in which a learner attempts to work out the meaning and uses of words, grammatical and other aspects of the language. So there are some taxonomies for language learning strategies by different scholars in the field, like O'Malley, Chamot, and Oxford, and in the past it was also Robin taxonomy. Now we will take the most popular one. It is by O'Malley and Chamot, as well as Oxford, both of them in 1990. Language learning strategies have been classified into three main categories. The first category, it is the cognitive strategies, and the second, metacognitive, and the last category, it is the socio-affective strategies. What do we mean by cognitive strategies? Cognitive strategies are the mental strategies learners use to make sense of their learning. And the metacognitive are behaviors used for centering, arranging, planning, and evaluating one's learning. Socio-affective strategies also represent a broad grouping that involves either interaction with another person or additional control after. Now we come to listening comprehension strategies. Listening comprehension strategies, according to the National Capital Language Resource Center, 2004, listening strategies are techniques or activities that contribute directly to the comprehension and recall of listening input. Listening strategies can be classified also by how listeners process the input. Now we come to the classification of the listening strategies. Actually, this classification also by Van der Graaf, following by Van der Graaf 1997, following also Robin categories and O'Malley and Chamot, in which listening comprehension strategies also divided or classified into three main categories: the metacognitive, cognitive, and socio-affective strategies. Within each category, we have also some strategies and some sub-strategies. In metacognitive, for example, we have planning, monitoring, evaluation. Planning categories includes advanced organization, directed attention, and selective attention. Monitoring also included comprehension monitoring and auditory monitoring, and the evaluation includes the performance evaluation, strategy evaluation, and problem identification evaluation. In cognitive, we have inferencing, elaboration, imagery, summarization, note-taking, repetition, and translation. Within the inferencing, we have also some sub-strategies, that is linguistic and voice and paralinguistic strategies and kinesthetic inferencing. In elaboration, we have three main types, that is personal elaboration, word elaboration, and academic elaboration. And for socio-affective strategies, we have asking for clarification, cooperation, lowering anxiety, and self-encouragement. Now we come to ask ourselves, what is the importance of strategy training and why we have to apply strategy training for listening comprehension strategies or for teaching listening comprehension skill. These also not only can be applied, the strategy training for listening, it is also applied for writing, reading, and speaking skills. So within each strategy, there is a specialty, or with each skill, there is a specialty for each skill. And according to that, we will find another, some strategies used for each one. Now, the importance of strategy training can be summarized in some point. That it is the first one, it is effective in improving language learners' performance. It helps learners to improve their strategy use and develops autonomy. It guides learners to become more conscious of their learning processes. It helps both learners and teachers to learn how to go about their optimal roles in the process of language learning. Number 5, it enhances motivation, removes anxiety, and reduces the uncertainty, as well as it fosters self-confidence. Some issues in strategy training. Actually, there are 2 points of view about the strategy training and how it can be conducted. We have one like separated or integrated training, and the second one, it is implicit with explicit training. What do we understand by separated with integrated training? Separated instruction focuses only on the teaching, teaching the learning strategies. It means that in the class, I am as a teacher, I have to teach my students what are the listening strategies without any integration within the course material or how to apply them. But in integrated, it is integrated training, consists of teaching content teachers how to incorporate learning strategy instruction into their regular classrooms with the help of the materials, with the help of real and actual examples. And such type of learning is very beneficial to understand it well. The second, it is implicit with explicit training. Implicit strategy training, or as known is blind training, teachers present only the activities and material designed to elicit use the strategies of being taught. It is implicitly. But students are not informed about the value, the purpose of using such strategies. But in the explicit view, the students are informed about particular learning strategies to be trained on. The teacher is informing the trainers and define the strategies, what is the value of the strategies and the purpose explicitly. Then the teacher trains the students on the students on how to use and transfer them to in-use situations. Explicit strategy training requires a well-trained teacher comparing to the implicit instruction. Why we have to focus on this idea that explicit strategy training requires a well-trained teacher compared to the implicit. It means that the teacher should be trained on how to train their students how to use these strategies. When we come to search how we can use them, what is and this one, I'm talking about the most effective approach for teaching language learning strategies as well as listening comprehension strategies. We find that the best one is the explicit integrated approach, in which I'm training my students like very explicitly that I'm teaching you the strategies, what are they, and what are the advantage and the purpose for using these strategies. And at the same time, it is integrated with my materials with real examples. When we came to ask about ourselves how explicitly we apply it, find in the literature, we find this problem, that it is motivating and training teachers to incorporate learning strategy in the classroom. Actually, such a point of view, it is neglected in the literature. You say that the explicit strategy integrated, it is the most helpful for the teacher, but yet there is no real no real examples found, or there is no training on how to incorporate learning strategies in the classroom. This takes us also to another problem. This problem, it is neglected in the literature. We have here this giving us this fact. Although the field of language learning strategies has been receiving a great amount of research, motivating and training teachers to incorporate language learning strategies in the classroom still need deep research. Consequently, there is a need to explore the ways and methods for motivating and training teachers to incorporate learning strategy in the classroom. for second foreign classroom. Actually, this quote has attracted the researcher to take such a point that it is Omali and Chamot 1990 state that research is needed on the most effective ways to motivate and train teachers in incorporating learning strategy in their foreign and second language classrooms, and on the types of instructional materials that best facilitate this process. Accordingly, there is a gap of knowledge in the literature regarding this topic. But whatever, we don't have to stop at this point. We have already the basic theoretical assumptions that we can use it in our theories for second language learning and teacher development. So we will take this as a point to go into deep research for such a point of view. If we as the researchers has to stop at any problem that there is no so much studies for some topic, it doesn't mean that we have to stop at this point. No, we have to find some solutions, some theoretical basis to go deeply for researching such points. Here, this section aims to discover the effective ways to motivate and train ESL and EFL teachers to incorporate learning strategies in instruction in the classroom, and to discover some types of instructional materials that will serve to achieve this aim. Importance of this study. It is the first study which discusses and tries to fill the gap of knowledge in this area. And it is an attempt to establish for more discussions and studies to enrich the research in this neglected area. It is an orientation towards teacher development. Now, the importance of teachers' training on instruction language learning strategies in the classroom. According to Robin Quinn Inus, cited in Thompson, assert the critical role of teachers' orientation and expertise development in learners' strategies, which act in assisting and facilitating the use of strategies by learners. Moreover, they highlight the significance of involving teachers in a strategic approach to teaching. In other words, they emphasize the necessity of extensive teacher training in strategy instruction as one of its important findings. Discussion of some findings. Teachers can be motivated and trained to incorporate strategy instruction via the following steps. First, some actual steps should be taken up by the educational policy, teachers, and administrations to raise teachers' motivation and to conduct training programs for teachers' professional development and incorporating language learning strategies in the course material in the classroom. Second, raising teachers' motivation intrinsically and extrinsically to adopt strategy instruction. We have to value the teachers and to raise their attitudes, talent, and how to invest also their enthusiasm in teaching. Applying information and communication technologies to language teaching and teachers training. Fourth, collaborative behavior. This collaborative behavior can be conducted into two main ways. First, collaborative behavior among teachers and administrations to conduct training programs to incorporate strategy instruction in the classroom. And also we have another form that it is collaborative behavior on wikis online. Conditions for teachers' collaborative behavior. We have to ask ourselves how we will go to this topic to be cooperative and to do some work. There are some conditions with these conditions can help in such point that it needs to be oriented and guided to create and produce a team and collaborative group. It must be carefully planned, nurtured, and supported. Time and space for collaboration. Support from colleges and universities leaders. Good learning, communication, and working skills as the norms of successful collaboration by teachers.
Thank you, Shimaa. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your time is 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, can I continue or it's over?
Yes, I think 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay, I will finalize, inshallah. Give motivation to allow teachers to learn from shared experience and availability of the facilities and access to expertise via technology and collaboration in all stages of teaching. Some suggested steps for developing teachers training to incorporate strategy instruction in the classroom at the level of colleges and universities. The first one is designing a plan for adopting training programs for teachers and raising their motivation. Devoting time and space monthly, semi-annually, and annually to share knowledge and experiences among teachers from different colleges and universities. Encouraging pair work and group work among teachers and to plan for incorporating learning strategies in the classroom. Having a discussion group for teachers where a particular topic from different resources can be discussed, and holding open lesson sessions at least one session per month so that teachers can check each other's work for more collaborative learning. Establishing a training center for teachers in which they are trained to incorporate strategy instruction in the classroom. Materials and resources that can be used. We have the strategic approach, explicit integrated approach, and open educational resources and other digital materials, video and films, mobile phones, ICT center at colleges, and online communication. These are some suggestions for further studies that can be done on investigating and motivating teachers, motivating and training teachers to incorporate strategy instruction in the classroom practically. And further studies can be done to investigate the effect of motivating and training teachers to incorporate strategy instruction in the classroom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Seema, for your presentation related to the topic about listening. Now I'm going to say hello back to the Honorable Professor Shagufta Imtiaz and also Sir Dedi Suheri. I think this is the end of the presentation, but before we close our webinar in this afternoon, we would like to propose some suggestions, even by chat and also directly. And there are some questions proposed or raised by chat box, and the question will be read by the moderators. And for the moderators, I think welcome. Thank you.
Okay, the first questions come from Hanim from Universitas Muhammadiyah Tangerang. It's for Professor Shagufta Imtiaz. His question is, what is the interesting ways to teach students in writing and how to motivate them, especially in distance learning area, Prof? Please.
Okay, so how to motivate? So we cannot talk about any best way of writing as such, but what the present current practices have been focusing on is to have a kind of the home literacy. So whatever the out of class practices which are there. So taking that into consideration, which I proposed also in the final suggestions which were there. So those things, not to overlook that. So bridging this gap between the home literacy and the class literacy, so that it is not that in the classroom it is something very different and they've never heard of things which they have been doing at home. So all those creative aspects and even the multimodal practices which are there, so those things, whether it is the text or the graphics or the picture or drama, all these things, those things can be incorporated in writing, and whether it is distance learning or whether it is face-to-face learning.
Thank you. I think the last question to the Professor Shagufta. This is from Simon Gia from University of Science Malaysia. Prof. Shagufta.
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. The last question, I think, from Malaysia. There are two questions actually, but I would like to propose just one because of the time. Thank you. What kind of strategies to increase students' reading interest? Because in 4.0 era, students' learning interests in learning has decreased. So the Simon Gare asked about the strategies to improve students' reading interest, especially in this pandemic era, because the pandemic make the students' learning has decreased. Thank you.
This question should have been answered by Shimaa, because Shimaa has so extensively and intensively looked at the strategies. So as far as strategies are concerned, so whether it is in the pandemic era, even outside that, even when we did not have, the most important thing as far as I feel, the lack of writing ability is because of our lack of reading. So that reading has to improve, that is one. And a number of strategies which are there. So there are a number of strategies, and they have been talked about by Shimaa. So even Shamu and Mali and all, they talk about the cognitive strategies. They talk about the metacognitive strategies. They talk about the affective and all the so many strategies which are there. So one of the strategies which can be there as far as writing is concerned is relating writing to reading. Relating and looking at the pre-writing strategies. What are some of the pre-writing strategies? So when we divide, for example, dividing writing into different sections. So if I look at the pre-writing, writing, and post-writing, so the different kinds of writing strategies used with these different parts of writing. So it can be planning, writing, revision, setting goals. Translating also, the use of translation is also as a strategy. Another clarifying, focusing. Then another important thing is that when we are talking about writing, and we have to look at which genre are we talking about in writing. So it may not, all these strategies may not work with all the genres. So if I'm looking at, for example, the report writing, or if I'm looking at the types of writing. So let's suppose it is a descriptive writing. Let's suppose it is expository writing. So there is a difference. So what kind of a writing would work in the descriptive? How to make them familiar with the descriptive kind of a writing? So in descriptive writing, for example, working with adjectives, adjective phrases, adjective clauses, because that is descriptive, with complex sentences. So strategies focusing on this area. If I'm talking about expository, for example, I'm looking, it is more factual. So working with these problem solving, etc., those kinds of things. So how does one begin the sentence? So those kinds of strategies. So the awareness of genre, which is there, that is one. The other is critical reading also. So reading something critically. That also helps me in making me aware of the kind of writing which is there. So what kind of a writing is there? What are the differences as far as the different kinds of writings are there? So asking them to read something critically, asking them to make an outline, asking them to plan, and then to write. And yet another thing which can be there is keeping portfolios that we talk about in the classrooms also. So keeping portfolios also. So writing, so over a period of time, for example, for one semester, asking them to keep a portfolio. And in portfolio will mean, to make it very brief, any kind of a writing. So it is in collaboration with the teacher and student. So any kind of a writing which is there as far as the student, which enhances his writing skills. So that is a collaborative effort. So it can be a sample of my creative writing. It can be something of academic writing. All these things. So these are all different ways of strategies, and the strategies which have been listed in the books, so may not apply in all the situations. So that is the reason even in my talk, I have been basically talking about this kind of a social contextualizing and the constructivist approach. So these may not, all these may not apply in all the situations. So I'm using some of the strategies here, and depending on the learner, depending on the level of the learner, depending on what I have to teach.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's a clear answer. Next, I'm going to invite the moderator to ask the last question, but direct question or by live. Thank you.
Okay, we would like to invite all participants to ask directly. For our three speakers, come on. Please, maybe you can raise your hand or say salam and then try to ask directly.
Okay, can I convey my question?
Okay, please.
Okay, thank you so much. I am Safruddin Marpaun from Tanjung Balai, North Sumatra Utara. Sorry, North Sumatra. I would like to convey some question to the keynote speakers. Can you listen my voice clearly before that?
Yes, of course.
Hello?
Yes, yes, of course,
Okay,
sir.
thank you, thank you. Okay. For the first question, I would like to convey for the first and second question for the first speaker. What specific writing topic or themes are suitable or interesting and stimulating to be applied in pandemic area as scientific writing? So I focus to the scientific writing. Second, what are the best or steps or tricks for academia to improve his or her ability in writing, especially scientific writing, as we know that writing is one of the difficult skills to be applied or to be learned. And the last question I would like to convey to the second speaker.
Okay.
I would like to comment about this question. In what age do a child to learn second language? Because some teachers or institutions impart English as a second language in a kindergarten or PAUD group level or play group, something like that. While children observer or children protection board, we can say Komisi Perlindungan Anak, something like that, always suggest and perhaps forbid to teach second language while they are still in PAUD or kindergarten. Children Protection Board forbid or deny to teach children while they are in PAUD, but they suggest to play, not to learn. Okay, please comment and give opinion about this statement. Thank you so much, and yeah, goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Sir Sapar Marpaungs. Maybe Prof. Shagufta can answer directly.
Okay, so this was, I think, the first question was about writing regarding the pandemic. What kind of specific themes and what specific kind of a writing should be there in pandemic, isn't it? I don't think he's there. So I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think writing can be confined to pandemic. That is one thing. So because writing is a skill, so we cannot confine it and saying that what specific kind of a writing should be there in pandemic area during this era, because writing is a creative skill, and in fact during the pandemic there are people who have been very creative. So it has given them a chance to work on their writing. So all these aspects, the kind of writing which they have been doing in the pandemic, so that can be utilized. Whatever kind of a writing that they are doing, it may be creative, it may be in the form of just a diary writing, it may just be in the form of a note writing. All these things can be used over here. So in the just confining writing to any one particular, I don't think that is, goes very well. And as far as writing is concerned. And the other is the ethnographic aspect, which is important, which I've already talked about. So different people coming from the different backgrounds. So what kind of writing do they have as far as the ethnography is concerned? What kind of, the autobiographical writing? So all these things can be made use of, and this is not just confined to the pandemic. Then the other question is that the ability to write scientific writing. So scientific writing will come under the ESP. So that is part of that becomes a very specialized branch. So that is the ESP. So just like your legalese language, so the law. So in law, when we speak about legalese language, which means that over here, when we are talking about the scientific writing, so scientific writing, one, that the learners have to be at a particular level. What kind of a terminologies? So all these aspects which are there, the terms, terminologies, the way, the content, the way in which it is, the way in which all these things are written. So they are all part of your scientific writing. So the use of hedges, for example, in scientific writing. So there are so many things which are there in scientific. So especially confined, looking at what kind of terminologies which are there, what kind of a registral variations are there as far as the scientific writing is concerned. So scientific writing is part of ESP, and it needs a completely different kind of an orientation, like the legalese language or like any other kind of a specialized writing. So one has to work on that and look at what is the kind of a text which the learner is reading. Number one, we have to look at that text, and we have to apply different kinds of strategies in order to enhance that particular text. So how do we improve? We have to take out words. We have to take out words and terminologies. The way in which that writing begins, we have to relate it to the actual writing outside the classroom, even in scientific text. And we can ask them to do some work outside the classroom, relating it to the text which they have. So it is not just confined to the classroom. So the out-of-class practitioners have to be related even over here. And scientific writing will come under ESP. So it is a special purpose. So it needs a special looking into the kind of a discourse patterns which are there, the kind of an organization which is there, the kind of a formal language which is there, the kind of hedging strategies which they are using, which is completely, let's say, to put it very simply, which is completely different from, let's say, a descriptive writing. So and it is also, you can also look at it in terms of a parallel writing. That also is a very important aspect of language teaching, where we look at a parallel text. So a parallel text will mean that, for example, if I'm looking at a scientific writing over here, so I'm looking at a completely different kind of a text. So for example, a report writing, a poem and a report writing, that is a parallel text. So looking at these aspects, that is all part of the creative writing also. So scientific writing as being different from a descriptive writing, for example. Thank you.
Okay, I think all the participants still have many questions, especially for Shimaa Hwaider topic and Mr. Dedi, but we have limit time. And thanks for the answer, Professor Shagufta Imtiaz. Yes, Professor. So we will going to the end of our agendas. That is closing speech by Mr. Abdul Rahman Siagian M. Home as our head of English department. Very welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much from dear from Shagufta, dear Mr. Dedi, and dear Hwaider, and all the participants, and especially from the rector. And I will be conclude today is in Indonesia, it has the curriculum of the NEO is the Merdeka Belajar, Kampus Merdeka,
it have the four steps. First step is the critical thinking, communication, creativity, and the communications. So when I hear about this Prof. Shagufta, when you want to teach, in the process, we have some the writing to be taught from the student. And when I hear from the Mr. Dedi, the linguistic, some of the position with me maybe from the linguistic. So everybody we need of speaking from to the teach, and specialist from the Hwaider, automatically if you clearly about this the listening, so it's me good of the process teaching learning in this class is might be funny. I think it's my conclude from the headmaster. So thank you very much from Shagufta. Thank you, Mr. Dedi, and thank you from the Hwaider. And we close in my ceremony and say Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Thank you, and I will be back to the moderator.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rahman. Okay,
Thank you very much.
I think today we have an interesting discussion, and I hope we have continuous event, and we really hope that all the speakers can join us in the next events. Thank you so much. And for all participants and all response, thank you so much. And we will send your certificate by email. I think it's enough for today. I'm Ayunda Sabrina. Really sorry if I get a mistake for today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.